Hello, everybody, and welcome to History Bite number 324, dated November 9th, 2021. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This video is entitled Baltimore Landmarks, Fort McHenry. Before I begin, however, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Juarez Lee Shelton, M.A. And in addition to that, please also click on that little notification bell immediately to the right of the subscribe button. In doing so, you will receive notifications when I post new, exciting, and enlightening videos in history, law, political science, theology, and philosophy. Thank you so much in advance. You're the best. Again, this video is entitled Baltimore Landmarks, Fort McHenry. Fort McHenry is a legendary coastal pentagonal bastion fort located at 2400 East Fort Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland, 21230. Located in the Locust Point neighborhood in South Baltimore, Fort McHenry once served as a defensive garrison for the city of Baltimore and surrounding areas against attack by either land or sea. Covering 43.25 acres, the area where the fort is located juts into the opening of Baltimore Harbor, with the Northwest Branch flowing past its north side and the Patapsco River on its south side. In American history, Fort McHenry is best known for two events, both occurring during the War of 1812. First, it was the site of a famous battle where it successfully defended Baltimore's harbor against a ferocious British naval attack from September 13th through 14th, 1814. And second, it was the setting for which the words that would become the Star-Spangled Banner, America's national anthem, were written by Francis Scott Key. Originally a poem entitled Defense of Fort McHenry, Key wrote the words on the morning of September 14, 1814, during the course of the Battle of Baltimore, after the 25-hour British bombardment of Fort McHenry had ceased. His inspiration came from the large American flag flying above the fort, indicating the success of the American forces stationed there. The land upon which Fort McHenry was constructed was previously the locale of the former Fort Whetstone. That structure had stood guard on the outskirts of Baltimore from the period of 1776 to 1797, a total of 21 years. Situated strategically at the mouth of the city's harbor, the locale was an excellent location to defend Baltimore against potential attacks by sea. For a naval assault to succeed, any enemy ships sailing toward the city would have to confront that fortress and break its defenses, or at the very least, substantially reduce them. Motivated by the need to improve the fort's defensive capabilities, coupled with the ever-increasing importance of Baltimore as a port city, a new fort was to be constructed on the site. Designed by French architect Jean Fontaine in 1798, the new fortification would be constructed between the years 1798 and 1800. It would be named for James McHenry, an American statesman who served as Secretary of War under Presidents George Washington and John Adams from January 1796 to March of 1800. McHenry had also served as both a delegate to the Continental Congress and as a signer of the U.S. Constitution from the state of Maryland. The design of the new structure was a pentagon-shaped bastion surrounded by a dry moat, which was essentially a giant trench. The moat provided an area, for troops to defend the fort in the event of land assault. Additionally, the bastions would provide additional points where cannons and riflemen could fire upon enemy troops, providing extra support to those in the trenches. Fort McHenry was a part of the first system of fortifications constructed along America's coast. Others were constructed in Boston, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Newport, Rhode Island, and Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and virtually all had star-shaped patterns with bastions. 'Twas during the War of 1812, and specifically during the Battle of Baltimore, September 12th through 15th, 1814, that Fort McHenry would see its only taste of the fire of war. As a part of the planned British land attack on the city of Baltimore during that conflict, British forces realized that they would require naval support to support their infantry movements, and thus Fort McHenry would have to be subdued. At that location, there were 1,000 American troops under the command of Major George Armistead, poised and ready for such an attack in numerous ways. At 6:00 a.m. on September 13, 1814, the British Navy, under the command of British Vice Admiral Alexander Cochrane, began what would be a 25-hour non-stop bombardment of the structure and its surrounding areas. As the waters near the fort were shallow, Cochrane could not use heavy warships and instead was reduced to using bomb vessels. Additionally, due to a chain of 22 sunken American ships, the British were unable to sail past the fort, even if they had really tried to do so. These ships fired exploding mortar shells at the fort as well as Congreve rockets, implementing a spectacular light show and giving Francis Scott Key his inspiration for the lyrics in the future Star-Spangled Banner. Throughout the bombardment, there were more than 1,500 cannonballs and rockets fired at Fort McHenry, all during the course of a driving rainstorm. Thanks to prudent reinforcement efforts by the Americans before the battle, there would be very little damage to the fort itself. British guns had a range of approximately 2 miles, whereas their rockets had a range of 1.75 miles. None of these, however, had pinpoint accuracy in any form. Wisely, they kept their ships just out of range of the American guns for much of the battle. During the night, Cochrane had vainly ordered a landing party to sneak past the fort to pull troops from the opposing forces. But indeed, it proved unsuccessful, resulting only in diverting a small amount of fire from the fort. All in all, there was a considerable lack of accuracy in the firing from both sides, and very little damage would occur to either the British fleet or Fort McHenry itself. On the morning of September 14, 1814, the British, having burned up all of their ammunition, ceased their attack and sailed on about their business. American forces had thus repelled the naval assault on Baltimore with only 4 lives lost. One of these individuals was an African-American soldier, Private William Williams, and an unnamed woman who was carrying supplies to troops at the fort who had been blown in half by a bomb. Additionally, 24 individuals were listed as wounded. A notable event occurred during the bombardment, which resulted in the crashing of a bomb into the fort's powder magazine. The bomb did not explode, however, likely being extinguished due to the heavy rain. Had it exploded, however, the loss of life may well have been substantial, not to mention the damage to the structure itself. They dodged a bullet there, for real. On the British side, the Americans managed to only hit 1 bomb vessel from the fort, resulting in the injury of 1 crewman. Also on that morning, the wonderful daily ritual occurred that truly made history on this occasion. After the bombardment ended, soldiers at the fort lowered the storm-tattered American flag which had flown throughout the course of the battle, and in its place they raised the enormous 30 by 42-foot American flag which had been sewn by and ordered from Mary Pickersgill a year before at a cost of $405. As stated above, the raising of the flag at Reveille was a daily ritual at the fort, but due to what had just occurred, it took special significance on that morning. The British, having failed to subdue Fort McHenry, were thus forced to abandon their land and sea assault on Baltimore, Maryland, and subsequently set sail for New Orleans, Louisiana. It was a major turning point in the war, which would officially end in February of 1815. So we repelled them, and they set sail to New Orleans. With the huge American flag having been raised over Fort McHenry, Francis Scott Key, a local attorney who was being held on a British ship in the harbor, attempting the release of a friend/prisoner, Dr. William Beans, was initially unsure whether or not American forces there had held. Once he saw the huge flag with its majestic and commanding presence, he realized that the fort had been held by the Americans, and it inspired him to write a poem entitled Defense of Fort McHenry. Sometime later, that poem would be set to the tune of the British drinking song known as To Anacreon in Heaven. If you've never listened to it, check it out. And renamed the Star-Spangled Banner. That song would become the national anthem of the United States of America by an act of Congress in 1931. There were 4 stanzas in total written. I don't know if you were aware of that, but it is only the first stanza that probably 99% of people know, all right? The words are as follows, all right? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? So the flag that was raised at Fort McHenry on September 14th, 1814, now rests at the National Museum of American History at the Smithsonian Institute. Many Americans mistakenly believe that that giant flag was raised above Fort McHenry just to spite the British, but that wasn't the case. This was a normal act done daily at Reveille. But of course, given what had just happened, it had extra special significance on that day. As stated above, the Battle of Baltimore during the War of 1812 was the only time in American history that Fort McHenry would experience the flame of battle. By 1820, just 6 years after reaching the pinnacle of its glory, it was recommended that the War Department abandon the fort for newer and more strategic locations. Sadly, between 1814 and 1835, the fort was allowed to deteriorate so significantly that it would have been useless in the case of an actual enemy attack. Thankfully, that never happened. A report in 1835 by Brigadier General Fenwick confirmed this fact, which would prompt the War Department in turn to order a serious update to the fort's facilities. As time went on, however, the growth of Baltimore as a city and the technological advancement of weaponry quickly rendered the fort obsolete, which necessitated new structures. Beginning in 1848, Fort Carroll was constructed further down the Chesapeake Bay as an updated and more sophisticated defensive structure for the city of Baltimore. The fort, named for John Carroll and designed by Brevet Colonel Robert E. Lee, was to add to Baltimore's defenses in cases of an enemy attack, and was part of the third system of fortresses constructed in the United States. Though Fort McHenry never again came under enemy attack, it would continue to serve in America's other wars. It would serve as a training camp for Maryland soldiers during the Mexican War from 1846 to 1848, and during the American Civil War, 1861 to 65, Fort McHenry would be refitted with modern weaponry, some of which still remains to this day, and also utilized as a military prison. Due to Maryland's shaky status at the beginning of the Civil War and the Baltimore riot of 1861, Confederate soldiers, as well as numerous individuals suspected of being sympathetic to the Confederate States of America, were imprisoned at the fort. These included, but were not limited to, a litany of figures in the Baltimore city government, the Maryland General Assembly, and other prominent Marylanders. Some of these individuals included Baltimore Mayor George William Brown, the entire Baltimore City Council, Baltimore Police Commissioner George Kane, Ross Winans, Francis Key Howard, who was the grandson of Francis Scott Key, and John Merriman. Merriman is significant because he had played an active role in the destruction of bridges in Maryland, thus inhibiting the flow of Union troops through the state. As a result, he was imprisoned by the authorities at Fort McHenry, but attempted to challenge the legality of said imprisonment by way of a writ of habeas corpus. Merriman petitioned the United States Circuit Court for the District of Maryland, where U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice Roger B. Taney was sitting on circuit duty. For those who are unaware, at this point in American history, U.S. Supreme Court justices also served as trial judges in the local federal circuit courts. All right? So they performed trial duties as well as their appellate duties on the Supreme Court. Check that out. You might find it quite interesting that the Supreme Court justices once served in this dual function. But Taney would grant Merriman's writ without delay and required the petitioner to appear in court before him. Taney sent U.S. Marshals to Fort McHenry to enforce his order. At the fort's gate, the U.S. Marshals met absolute refusal by General George Cadwalader to release Merriman to the custody of the Marshals. His argument was clear, that he was under orders from President Abraham Lincoln, who had suspended the writ of habeas corpus, to deny his release, thus effectively preempting the relief sought by Merriman. For the record, the case is known as Ex parte Merriman, and Taney's order was never accepted by the Lincoln administration. It was a very contentious legal matter, a standoff here between the executive and the Chief Justice. There's far more to this case than what I've stated at this point. So if you want to learn more, the case, once again, is Ex parte Merriman. Check that out and do your legal research. All right? Further updates to the fort were commenced in 1873, but were suspended in 1876 without further completion. 3 decades later, in the Spanish-American War, 1898, Fort McHenry would once again be used for the purpose of troop training. On July 20th, 1912, the fort was formally deactivated as an active military outpost by the federal government. And in 1914, Baltimore City leased the area for use as a municipal park. Also in that year, which was the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Baltimore, Congress appropriated $75,000 for the construction of a monument to Francis Scott Key and the soldiers and sailors who participated in the Battle of North Point and the defense of Fort McHenry. The Star-Spangled Banner Association was also given the authority to erect a monument to Major George Armistead. Armistead's monument was erected in 1914, while Key's monument came in the form of a bronze figure of Orpheus, was delayed until 1922, thanks largely to World War I. During America's involvement in the First World War, which we were a participant from 1917 to 18, the fort was returned to the authority of the War Department and converted into a military hospital for troops returning home from Europe. As such, dozens of new buildings were constructed on the property to accommodate these demands. After the war, the buildings were deconstructed, and the fort was largely returned to its original appearance. On March the 3rd, 1925, the area was declared by the federal government to be Fort McHenry National Park, and a restoration project by the U.S. Army was implemented to return the entire fort largely to its appearance in the 1830s. In 1933, Fort McHenry was transferred from the authority of the Army to the National Park Service, Department of the Interior. And on August the 11th, 1939, its designation was changed to the National Monument and Historic Shrine. Fort McHenry National Monument and Historic Shrine. To date, it is the only place in the United States of America with such a double designation. In spite of the site's status as a national park, the Defense Department retains the right to close Fort McHenry to the public for national emergencies for military use until such emergencies have abated. This has been invoked one time during World War II when the area was under the limited authority of the Navy as a Coast Guard base. In spite of this, the historic parts of the site would remain open to the public throughout the war. On October 15, 1966, Fort McHenry would be added to the National Register of Historic Places, and since that era, it has become tradition for new versions of the national flag to fly over the fort before being flown anywhere else. That very thing was done with both the 49 and 50 U.S. Flags, 49 and 50 star U.S. flags, okay, with the addition of first Alaska and then Hawaii as states. And those original flags are still located on the property. By presidential proclamation on July 2nd, 1948, an American flag flies over the fort 24 hours a day. In recent times, it is highly worthy to note that in 2010, the state of Maryland began issuing commemorative War of 1812 vehicle license plates, which featured Fort McHenry as a part of the design. Additionally, in 2013, the fort was honored with its own quarter with the America the Beautiful Quarters program. That program honored many historic sites in the United States. In September 2014, Fort McHenry would celebrate the 200th anniversary of the writing of the Star-Spangled Banner, which was called the Star-Spangled Spectacular, and it featured fireworks and other observant displays. Most recently, in 2015, the fort received some necessary maintenance to its brick and mortar structure. In August of 2020, a rare event occurred at the fort due to the COVID-19 pandemic, when then Vice President Mike Pence held his renomination acceptance speech at that location. Annually, on September 12th, Defenders Day is celebrated in Baltimore City and County, commemorating the successful defense of the city of Baltimore by invading British land and naval forces from September 12th through 14th, 1814. It is the fort's largest annual celebration, which includes fireworks and numerous other programs and events, if you ever want to check that out. Fort McHenry in the modern era is a fully functioning museum, open to the public for research and other educational purposes. It is accessible by car, public transportation, and water taxi. Additionally, numerous volunteer opportunities are available to anyone who wishes to bring the history of this great citadel to life. To best plan one's visit, please contact the site for updates on hours, accessible areas, and possible restrictions which may be in place based on current conditions. Again, the address is 2400 East Fort Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland, 21230. So that concludes my video on the Baltimore landmark, and indeed national landmark, known as Fort McHenry. All right. The only place in the United States of America known as a national monument and historic shrine. So I thank you so much for listening to this video. If you've made it through the whole thing, I really appreciate you taking the time to learn a thing or two about the history of this national landmark, where our national anthem was written. Okay. Fort McHenry is, a very important, military post in American history, and, indeed was a location that helped save, one could argue, help save the future of our nation. All right. Even though that history is not known by many individuals, it is something that certainly should be taught, as the British, after being repelled by Fort McHenry, would sail on to another defeat at the Battle of New Orleans. All right. The War of 1812 would officially end not long thereafter, with the Treaty of Ghent being ratified by all parties involved by February of 1815. So if you want to learn more about Fort McHenry than may have been covered in this video, though I pretty much covered a substantial amount of territory, please feel free to do some more independent research. All right. And you will see that there is truly, truly a great deal to review and read about this national treasure in Baltimore, Maryland. So again, thank you for listening to this video. If you have any questions or controversies, leave them down below and I'll be happy to answer them. If you like this video, gain some knowledge, some insight, drop me a like. That would be greatly appreciated. And, if you've not subscribed to my YouTube channel at this point, I invite you to do so now. Juarez Lee Shelton, M.A. Your support is appreciated more than you could ever realize. Take care, stay safe out there, and I will talk to you at the next video. Peace.